Harry Potter fanfiction. Yeah, my final year at Hogwarts started with a bang. Quite literally. I was just trying to get past Malfoy, not end up on top of him. But apparently, the Hogwarts Express had a personal vendetta against me. Because the moment I stepped into the corridor, the train jolted like it'd been hit with a rogue bludger. And because the universe despises me, guess whose chiseled chest I crashed into? Wait, why the hell was I focusing on his chest? Potter, Malfoy drawled, voice all silk and poison. If you missed me that much over the summer, you could have just sent an owl. I barely had time to process the absolute nightmare of a situation I was in. Hands fisted in his stupidly expensive robes, knee dangerously close to his thigh, before he made it worse by flashing that stupid smirk of his. Of course he was enjoying this. "Get off me," I snapped, shoving against his shoulders. "You first, Potter," he shot back. "Though I understand the urge to throw yourself at me, can't say I blame you." I swear, if I could hit him without getting detention, I would have done it. Before I could retort, I realized something. My wand, previously tucked into my robes, was now jammed between us at a very unfortunate angle. And from the sharp inhale Malfoy just took, I'd guess it was currently stabbing him right in the ribs. Oh, this just got better. "As much as I love being stabbed, Potter," he said through gritted teeth, "maybe move." "Oh, so now you're asking nicely." I huffed, but finally untangled myself and stepped back. Malfoy made a show of straightening his robes like I'd somehow infected them with my Gryffindor energy. "You should really work on your balance, Potter. I know Gryffindors have a hero complex, but throwing yourself into my arms is a bit much." I opened my mouth to reply, but of course, there was already an audience. A few younger students were snickering from the sidelines. Malfoy leaned in slightly, just close enough that only I could hear him. "Try to control yourself next time. Yeah?" His gaze flicked to my lips for half a second too long before he brushed past me into his compartment. I stood there, fists clenched, heart pounding, trying very hard not to launch him out of the nearest window. Merlin help me. I was in for one hell of a year. 5 minutes later. "You won't believe what just..." I said, only to be cut off by the sight of Hermione and Luna looking too busy kissing each other. "Oh, hi, Harry," Hermione said, breaking away from Luna, blushing ever so slightly. Yes, they had been dating for a year now, subjecting us lonely singles to the torturous sight of how adorably perfect they were together. It all started when Luna asked Hermione out for the Christmas party last year. We were all surprised considering how the two of them were literally poles opposite, but they made it work. It was almost like they completed each other. "Sorry to interrupt you guys. I just go and find Ron," I said a bit awkwardly. "Now, Harry, please sit with us. Tell us what happened. Was it the Nargles?" Luna replied in her ever-so-dreamy voice, while Hermione just flashed me an "I don't believe in it, but isn't she adorable" smile. No. It was just Malfoy." I sighed, not really getting why my heart rate spiked thinking about the whole incident now. "What did he do now? Does he need another one of my punches?" Hermione said, making me chuckle. "No, I guess he's..." I tried to say, before Ron entered the compartment, cutting me off. "Oh my god! You won't believe who's transferring to Hogwarts this year!" His voice all excited. "With the way you're acting, maybe Godric Gryffindor himself," I laughed. "Real funny, Harry, but Viktor Krum is gonna be at Hogwarts this year. He had some issues at Durmstrang, so he'll be completing his final year with us," Ron said, all smiley. "How now? Does that mean your fanboying era's back?" Hermione retorted, making us all laugh, except Ron. "Shut up. It's just... he's awesome. And maybe this time, I might have a chance with him," he said, a little hesitant but hopeful. Ron has had a crush on Viktor since he participated in the Triwizard Tournament, but needless to say, he hasn't done anything about it yet. Maybe this year's his chance with Viktor. There's one teeny tiny problem, though. I mean, Hermione, how do you feel about Ron obsessing over your ex-lover? I chuckled. Oh, please, Harry, she said, hitting me on my arm playfully. Will you stop teasing me about it? It's all in the past. And Ron has all my blessings if he likes Viktor. Moreover, I already found what I was looking for. She spoke shyly as she snuggled closer to Luna, smiling at her as Luna kissed the top of her head. Damn, they're literally couple goals. As all of us settled into our compartment, I leaned against the window, unable to help when my mind drifted off to the moment me and Draco shared earlier. The way his eyes lingered on my lips, the way his body felt warm against mine. Wait, I hate this guy, right? Then why the hell am I thinking about him? Well, it's gonna be a chaotic year at Hogwarts. A few days later. Of course, Hogwarts had to be a nightmare. Because apparently, Malfoy and I were now stuck in some twisted game of cat and mouse, where the universe just had to shove us into each other's path every 5 minutes. Breakfast, Malfoy was at Slytherin table, staring at me like he was contemplating hexing me or something worse. Potions, we got paired up again, and instead of his usual snide remarks, he just kept watching me with this unreadable expression, like he was trying to solve a particularly annoying puzzle. Even walking down the bloody corridors, it was always, "Move, Potter. You move, Malfoy." And then neither of us would move. But what really set me off was during our free period outside. It had been enough days of this nonsense, and I was already on edge. Then Malfoy had the audacity to casually lean against a tree and smirk at me like I was some kind of amusement. "What the hell is your problem, Malfoy?" I snapped. He raised an eyebrow. "Aside from your dreadful haircut." His cronies standing around snickered at this. "Do you enjoy being a pain in my—" I was about to say before being cut off. "Careful, Potter," he murmured, stepping closer. "You keep seeking me out like this, people might start talking." That was it. Before I knew it, I shoved him. Malfoy shoved me back. The next thing I knew, we were full-on grappling like a couple of idiots in the middle of the courtyard, students forming a circle around us, cheering like we were putting on a show. "Enough!" Snape's angry voice cut through the chaos. "Detention. Both of you." Later that evening. Scrubbing cauldrons in the dungeons was bad enough. Doing it with Malfoy was absolute hell. Both of us were working in silence. The only sounds were the scratch of my brush against the cauldron and Malfoy's annoyingly controlled breathing. "Careful, Potter," Malfoy drawled, not even looking up from his own cauldron. "Wouldn't want you to break a nail." I rolled my eyes. "Shut up, Malfoy." "Charming," he mused. "Remind me why I even bother talking to you." I scowled and scrubbed harder, trying to focus on literally anything other than the fact that Malfoy had been acting weird. Less of a condescending bastard, more watchful. Because why had he wiped that potion residue off my face earlier? And why was he sneaking glances at me when he thought I wasn't looking? I was so lost in my spiraling thoughts that I didn't realize I pressed too hard against the edge of the cauldron. My hand slipped. Fast. I hissed, jerking back to see a thin but deep slice across my hand, bleeding almost instantly. "Brilliant," I muttered. Before I could move, Malfoy was there, grabbing my wrist. His fingers were firm but surprisingly gentle. "Bloody idiot," he muttered under his breath. My first instinct was to snap at him, but then he did something insane. Without hesitation, he tugged out his wand and murmured, "Episki." And just like that, the pain was gone. I should have said thanks, or at the very least mocked him for the unexpected kindness. But all I could do was stare, because Malfoy hadn't let go. His fingers lingered around my wrist, gently brushing it. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw clenched like he was fighting something. "You all right, Potter?" His voice low, and something in me twisted. This was wrong. Malfoy didn't look at me like that, like he actually cared. I wrenched my hand away. "Why do you care?" I demanded, heart hammering. His lips parted slightly, as if he was about to answer. But then his face shuttered, expression smoothing back into his usual smug mask. "Don't flatter yourself," he retorted. "I just don't want to be blamed if you bleed out like a dramatic Gryffindor." Liar. Before I could call him out on it, Snape's voice echoed from the doorway. "Get back to work, unless you'd like another night in detention." Malfoy turned without another word, returning to his cauldron as if nothing had happened. But I wasn't an idiot. Something had happened, and I had no idea what to do about it. An excruciating hour later. Finally, the detention was over, and I was back in the common room, sitting by the fireplace, talking to Ron, who looked anything but comfortable. "Yeah, we've been talking, but I just don't think Viktor sees me that way," Ron muttered. "Are you mad? He's been hovering around you." I tried to knock some sense into him. Ron scoffed. "He thinks I'm just a fanboy. That's all he sees. Some scrawny kid who won't shut up about how brilliant he is." I frowned. "Ron, come on. Viktor's been looking out for you. He saved you a seat at breakfast. And don't think I didn't catch that charmed quill he gave you. The bloke's practically courting you." Ron shook his head. "Yeah, well, doesn't mean anything. He's famous. I'm just me." Before I could argue, raised voices cut through the common room's murmur. In the corridor, Luna and Hermione stood face to face, the usual warmth between them replaced by tension. "Luna," Hermione said through gritted teeth, "can you please, just for once, not be so unbothered?" Luna tilted her head. "You want me to bother about what people think?" "Yes!" Hermione burst out. "Because sometimes it matters. You don't see the way people look at you." Luna blinked. "I do see them." "Then why do you act like you don't care?" "Because I don't care, Hermione," Luna said softly. "Why should I? Why should you?" "Because perception matters. You walk around in your own little world, and that's fine, Luna, but sometimes people will judge you for it. And I just—" Hermione stopped, shaking her head. "Forget it." Luna reached for her hand, but Hermione stepped back. "I can't do this right now." She turned and stormed into the common room, leaving Luna in the corridor, her eyes unreadable. Hermione collapsed onto the couch beside us. "What was that about?" Ron asked. Hermione gave a humorless laugh. "Just another classic installment of Hermione and Luna don't see the world the same way." Ron and I exchanged a glance. "She doesn't care what people think," Hermione continued. "And I admire that, I do. But sometimes it's exhausting. It's like she refuses to see the world doesn't work that way. You can't just float through life, ignoring consequences." Ron scratched his head. "I mean, I get it. You're practical. She's not." Hermione sighed. "It's more than that. She's so free, and I love that, but I feel like she doesn't understand what it's like to be careful, to always be thinking 10 steps ahead, to worry about how you come across because the world will tear you apart otherwise." Before the silence could stretch, Hermione shook her head. "Anyway, enough about me. What were you two talking about?" Ron hesitated. "Viktor." Hermione's face softened. "Ron, you know Viktor likes you, right?" Ron huffed. "Yeah, sure he likes me, but not like that. I'm just another kid who thinks he's great." "Or maybe," I said, "he actually does like you, and you're just too thick to see it." Ron rolled his eyes, but he smiled slightly. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, thinking. Should I say it? Should I tell them Malfoy had been different? That I couldn't stop thinking about the way his voice had softened when I was hurt? But how could I? Malfoy was our enemy. He was the one person we had hated for years. Telling them I wasn't sure where I stood, felt impossible. So I swallowed it down and said nothing. 2 weeks later. The stadium was roaring. Gryffindor versus Slytherin. Easily the most brutal Quidditch match of the season. The score was tight, and the tension was suffocating. The snitch was right there, so close I could taste it. Malfoy was right next to me, pushing his broom as hard as I was, refusing to fall behind. Neither of us was backing down. As both of us sped further, I reached for it. So did Malfoy, the competition between us intense. And then, a collision. A blur of movement. My broom hit his, just enough to throw him off balance. I barely had time to register what was happening before he was falling. Straight down. My stomach lurched. The snitch vanished from my mind. The match didn't matter. Nothing did. I was already diving, breath stuck in my throat. The professors tried to subdue the impact of his fall, but he hit the ground hard. By the time I landed, the world was a mess of shouting, but all I saw was Malfoy, unconscious. I dropped to my knees beside him. Draco. My voice came out hoarse. He didn't move. Draco. Still nothing. Soon Madame Hooch and the other professors were making their way toward him, rushing him to the hospital wing, with me just behind them. 10 minutes later, I sat outside the hospital wing, the sounds of the match long gone, replaced by the silence of the corridor. Madame Pomfrey had shooed me out as soon as she started working on Malfoy. Said he needed rest, said hovering wouldn't wake him up any faster. Yet she didn't stop me from waiting outside. Then I heard footsteps, and soon I was snapped out of my thoughts with a voice. Mate, what the hell? I looked up. Ron and Hermione stood in front of me, looking confused. You left the march in the middle of a Gryffindor-Slytherin game, Ron said, as if the words physically hurt him. For Malfoy. I sighed. You've never left a march, ever. Hermione added, softer. What's going on? I stared at the floor. My heart was still in my throat. Images of Malfoy hitting the ground, replaying like a stuck record. I hadn't thought about anything else since. Not the snitch, not the match, just him. I don't know, I muttered. I thought I hated him. I do hate him. Or, I did. But lately it's like... I stopped, exhaling sharply. I keep feeling this pull, and it's driving me mad. Ron blinked. Pull? I shook my head. I don't know how to explain it. I think I care about him. I keep thinking about him when I shouldn't. And today, when I hit him, I couldn't think about anything but whether he was okay. If anything happens to him... I swallowed hard. I don't know what I'd do. Ron frowned. If your head was such a mess, why didn't you tell us before? I hesitated. Because all we've done since first year is hate him. And now, I don't even know what this is. And I was scared you'd judge me. Ron and Hermione exchanged a glance. Hermione sighed. Harry, we're not going to judge you. But you have to be careful. You know his family's history. Voldemort might be gone, but if he ever comes back... She paused. Draco's family will be on his side. And if this is all just some game to him, you'll be the one who gets hurt. It's all a mess, I muttered. But right now, all I care about is if he'll be okay. A beat of silence. Then, distract me, I said, looking up. Hermione, what's going on with you and Luna? I haven't seen you two together much lately. Hermione shifted uncomfortably. We're taking a break. Ron's eyebrows shot up. What? Since when? A few days ago. Hermione folded her arms. We don't know if we're actually compatible. We're so different. She exhaled, looking down. But I can't lose her, Harry. I frowned. Hermione, you two are perfect together. Don't lose her over something stupid. She looked away, lips pressed tight. I turned to Ron. And you? How are things with Viktor? Ron went red immediately. What things? Oh, come on, I scoffed. You like him. Yeah, well, it doesn't matter. You'll never see me as anything more than some random fan. At this point, I might as well give up on it. Ron's voice was bitter, like he'd already made peace with it. I rolled my eyes. You're an idiot. Have you seen the way he looks at you? Just go for it. Ron muttered something under his breath, face still red. And for the first time since the match, I almost felt like myself again. My friends might be idiots when it came to their own feelings, but being there for me, they never missed a chance. And I was more than grateful for them, though I won't ever say it to their faces. The next day, the moment Madame Pomfrey let me in, I pushed open the door, heart pounding like an idiot. Malfoy was propped up against his pillows, looking pale but alive. He blinked at me, then smirked. Well, well, if it isn't Saint Potter. His voice was scratchy, but his arrogance was perfectly intact. I must be in worse shape than I thought if you are the first thing I see. I let out a breath. Yeah, well, you fell off your broom, Malfoy. Thought I'd check if you finally broke that thick skull of yours. How is it you that's looking like a disaster? Did they beat you up for ruining the match? He said, all too amused looking at my disheveled state. I slept in the corridor. For me? He pressed a hand to his chest in mock sentimentality. Potter, if you wanted to be my knight in shining armor, you should have just said so. I rolled my eyes. Shut up, Malfoy. He grinned. You do care. Don't start. Oh, I'm starting, Potter. Because this is fascinating. The boy who lived, the pride of Gryffindor, spent the night curled up outside my hospital room instead of celebrating his team's almost win. I crossed my arms. I didn't think we'd won when you were busy plummeting to your death, you prat. His expression flickered, just for a second. Then, didn't know you cared so much about me staying alive. I swallowed. Shut up. Malfoy tilted his head. Make me. And maybe it was exhaustion. Or maybe it was the fact that my brain had been screaming at me for weeks, that I didn't hate him as much as I was supposed to. Either way, I leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't perfect. It was hesitant, almost careful, like neither of us knew what we were doing. His lips were warm, slightly chapped, and for a moment he actually froze. Then he kissed me back, just for a second, just enough to make my head spin. I pulled away first. His expression was unreadable, like maybe he didn't know what this was either. I stepped back. I didn't finish. Hermione's warning still intact in my head. If this is just a game to him, you'll be the one who gets hurt. I just turned and left, because I was pretty sure I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. 10 minutes later, I walked into the Great Hall, still feeling a little shaken from what had just happened, but I tried to push it aside. My eyes scanned the room until I saw Hermione, sitting at the table with her nose buried in a book. Luna was beside her, happily eating pudding with her usual serene expression. Hey, I said, sitting across them. You two made up then? Hermione glanced up with a small smile. Yeah, we had to talk things through. It's not always easy, but we realized we were just focused on the wrong things before. She glanced at Luna. We're different in a lot of ways, but I can't imagine not having her in my life. Luna nodded. She's as sane as I am, even more so. Her voice dreamy as a bit of pudding slid down her chin. Though I'm still a bit messy. You're my mess, Hermione said, softly brushing the pudding off Luna's chin. I couldn't help but feel a warmth, seeing them like this, so calm and understanding with each other. I'm glad you two worked things out, I said, feeling genuinely happy. Just then, Ron stormed in, looking miserable as he sat next to me. Made a complete fool of myself in front of Viktor, he muttered. What happened? Hermione asked. Tried to impress him with Quidditch talk, and then I knocked over the drink cart, spilled everything, and then tried to make it seem like I was fine, but just ended up looking like an idiot. Gosh, I'm useless, he said, his face in his hands. It's not true, Ron. I tried to cheer him up before he cut me off. Don't. I'm done with this. Viktor's too out of my league, and I'm done making a fool out of myself trying to get him. I sighed, knowing I was going to have to do something about this. Otherwise, Ron would wallow in it forever. Later that day, the three of us walked toward the common room, thick silence stretching between us. My head was a mess. Malfoy, the kiss, the anger I still felt every time I looked at him. It wasn't supposed to be this complicated. You know, it's ridiculous, I muttered. I thought I hated Malfoy. I've spent years hating him. But now, after today, I don't even know what I feel anymore. Ron looked at me like I was an idiot. How the hell can you be confused about your own feelings? You either like him or you don't. I wish it was that simple, I sighed. That kiss, it didn't make sense. Just because you've got the emotional range of a teaspoon doesn't mean we all have, Ron, Hermione said, rolling her eyes. You can't expect Harry to have it all figured out. Ron huffed. Hey, I'm just trying to understand it, all right? 1 minute, you hate Malfoy. The next, you're kissing him. This whole thing's a bloody mess. Before I could respond, Viktor Krum walked up to us, catching us off guard. Ron, he said, voice deep, can we talk? Ron blinked. Sure. What's going on? Viktor hesitated. I wanted to ask if you'd like to go to Honeydukes with me this weekend. He glanced at me before looking back at Ron. As a date, if you're free. Ron's mouth opened and closed a few times before he stammered. Wait, you want to go on a date? With me? Viktor nodded. Ron's face lit up. Bloody hell! Yes! Of course, yes! Watching Ron's reaction, I couldn't help but feel a little satisfied. It felt like everything was coming together for him. As Viktor left and Ron babbled in disbelief, my mind flashed back to earlier. I'd talked to Viktor about Ron after I'd noticed all the little things he did for him. The way he looked at him. The way he was always near him. Viktor had admitted that he liked Ron but was unsure of how it would look, considering his fame and how the other students treated him. He was afraid it might mess with Ron, maybe even put him in a bad spot. I told him to go for it, though. I told him if he liked Ron, he should at least try. And now, seeing Ron's face light up like that, I knew I'd done the right thing. Ron was still rambling about how excited he was, still clueless about my involvement in this, and I didn't plan on telling him anytime soon. 5 days later. For days, I'd done a fantastic job avoiding Malfoy, ducking out of hallways, skipping Quidditch, even taking the long way to class. I wasn't going to let one stupid kiss mess with me. But Malfoy, of course, didn't get the memo. He cornered me between classes, called my name across the Great Hall, even slipped notes into my bag. And now, here we were, in an empty corridor after hours, because he wouldn't leave me the hell alone. What do you want, Malfoy? I snapped. Last time I checked, you hated me. Merlin Potter, do you actually believe that? His voice shook. I tried to hate you. I wanted to. Do you know how much easier that would have been? His eyes burned into mine, stripped of any sneer or mask. But I haven't hated you in a long time. I don't even know when it started. Last year? Maybe before that. But it's been driving me insane. You, he exhaled. You've been driving me insane. And as much as I told myself it was just because we were supposed to hate each other, it wasn't that. It isn't that. He exhaled sharply. I don't know how to want you when I'm not supposed to. But I do. And you do too. You're wrong, I barely muttered. Then tell me you don't feel this. He whispered as his lips crashed into mine, burning with desperation. For one stupid, weak moment, I let myself sink into it. Then I pushed him away. We can't do this. We're too different. You're family. They'd always support Voldemort. My throat tightened. They'd help him kill people like me. Malfoy's breath hitched. You think I want that? You think I have a choice? I've never had a bloody choice in my life, Potter. I live under my father's rules, my mother's expectations. I can't even breathe without them deciding how I do it. At least you have them, I muttered. Mine are gone because of the war your family wants me to bring back. Silence. I'm not asking you to be with me, he said, voice quiet. I don't want to be alone in this, in what I feel. So can we at least try being friends? Try not hating each other? I didn't answer right away, but for the first time all year, the knot in my chest loosened. Yeah, I said. We can try. Half an hour later, I was finally feeling peaceful. For the first time in weeks, my head wasn't a battlefield. Things with Malfoy were all right, and I could finally breathe. Then I stepped into the dorm, and Ron exploded. Did you talk to Viktor about me? He yelled, face redder than I'd ever seen it. I blinked. How was your date? Terrible, thanks for asking, Ron snapped. His fans kept interrupting, telling him he deserved better than some poor Weasley. All thanks to you. You bloody meddled. I was helping. I was keeping my heart safe, Harry. But no, you had to swoop in like a hero and ruin everything. I stiffened. Because you weren't willing to do anything about it. Someone had to. His jaw clenched. Yeah? Well, congrats. You made it worse. And then he stormed out. 2 weeks later, things were different. Malfoy and I had somehow fallen into a routine. He'd nudge my foot under the table in the library, smirk when I rolled my eyes. He always found a way to sit next to me in class, his arm brushing against mine like it was accidental, except it happened every time. Once, he stole my scarf on a particularly cold morning, wrapping it around his own neck with a smug, "You don't mind, do you, Potter?" I should have been annoyed. I wasn't. We'd walk back from class together, not really talking, but not talking either. And when I caught him staring, because he definitely stared, he didn't look away. Once in the library, he fell asleep on my shoulder, and I sat there for a full 20 minutes pretending I wasn't losing my mind. We never talked about it, but the next day, he slid a chocolate frog across the table without a word, and I figured that was his way of saying something. I wasn't sure what any of it meant, but it felt nice. Meanwhile, Ron and I were talking again. Sort of. He still shot me glares across the common room, still huffed when I sat next to him at meals, but he answered when I spoke. That was progress. I still think you're a prat, he muttered one evening. Noted, I said. Then Malfoy passed by, brushing against my shoulder, and I forgot whatever else I was about to say. A few days later. You're still mad at Harry? Come on, Ron. Hermione sighed as the three of us walked down the corridor. I'm not mad, Ron muttered. I just think he's an idiot. Before I could argue, hushed voices carried from a nearby alcove. We exchanged glances. too suspicious to ignore. We crept closer. "It has to be you." Lucius Malfoy's voice, smooth and commanding. "There is no one else. You will do it." A long silence. Then, "You'll take care of Potter, won't you?" I felt my stomach drop. Draco didn't say a word, just stood there, silent. I didn't wait to hear more. Didn't need to. It was already clear. Whatever I thought had been happening between me and Draco, it was all an act. "We're sorry, Harry," Hermione whispered, but I wasn't listening. I was already walking away. 2 days later. I hadn't left the dorm, hadn't gone to class, couldn't bring myself to care. Ron stood awkwardly near the door, fidgeting like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Finally, he just sighed. "Malfoy's been asking about you." I scoffed, sinking back into my pillow. I'm done with all this bullshit. Ron hesitated, then sat down at the edge of his bed. "Yeah. Well, things with Viktor are still the same. Distant, I guess. Nothing's changed." I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the ache in my chest. "Sorry, Ron. I shouldn't have meddled." He didn't respond right away, just sat there, looking at me like he wasn't sure what to say next. A silence stretched out, heavy with everything we hadn't talked about. Finally, he mumbled, "It's fine, mate. Just don't shut everyone out." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach didn't loosen. The next day, I finally dragged myself out of the dorm. Potions was first, and I couldn't afford to fall behind. As soon as I sat down, I felt Draco's eyes on me, but I refused to look at him. Throughout the class, he tried to catch my attention, tried talking, but I ignored him. In my anger, I mixed the potion wrong, and Seamus, my partner, ended up with boils all over his face. Snape dismissed the class, dragging Seamus to the hospital wing while the others filed out. I was still fumbling with my bag, trying to clean up the mess. Draco hovered near me. "Harry, please." I didn't respond, shaking with anger and confusion. Ron and Hermione stayed near, watching me with concern, but I wasn't ready to talk to Draco. Not yet. Draco stepped closer, his voice pleading. "Harry, just talk to me for a second. Please." I finally snapped, raising my wand and pointing it at him. "I don't trust people like you, Draco. Followers of the Dark Lord." Draco froze, eyes wide with surprise. "What are you talking about?" "The conversation I overheard with your father. You're just like them, aren't you? You're going to do what they want, and I can't be part of that." Draco softened, stepping closer. "I wasn't going to do it, Harry. You should know better than anyone that I don't want to follow the Dark Lord. Not like my parents. I never wanted that." His eyes locked with mine, his voice barely a whisper. "I want to be good, Harry. For you. For us." "I don't know what to believe anymore," I muttered. "Then I'll prove it to you. I'll show you I really want this. Really want you. I promise. I won't disturb you unless I prove it." Then he left, leaving me standing there, uncertain and torn. 3 days later. 3 days had passed without a word from Draco, and part of me thought maybe it was for the best. The confusion, the questions, I'd only end up hurt anyway. It was easier this way, or at least I kept telling myself that. Then as I walked through the courtyard, I saw it. Viktor, of all people, standing in front of a group of students, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen him. And then Ron, standing there, clearly confused as Viktor stepped forward. "Ron," Viktor started, voice shaky but sincere. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I've spent too long letting things, other people, get in the way of us." His gaze hardened slightly as he looked around. "And if anyone makes fun of you again, they'll have to go through me." Ron's eyes were wide as Viktor continued. "The past few days without you have been miserable, Ron. I couldn't stop thinking about how to fix this. But I know now that I just want you to be mine. Will you?" Ron kissed him before Viktor could finish, and Luna and Hermione cheered from the side. Afterwards, Viktor whispered, "Harry was just trying to help." Ron turned to me, softening. "Sorry, Harry. I've been a brat." I shrugged, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'm happy for you, mate." But the sting in my chest was unmistakable. It wasn't from Ron's apology. It was the absence of Draco that hurt the most. 2 days later, Draco was still absent. As much as I tried to ignore it, the ache in my chest refused to fade. I sat with Hermione, Luna, and Ron, but my mind wasn't fully there. Suddenly, a loud commotion broke through the air, pulling our attention to the grounds. We rushed outside to find Draco sprawled on the ground, blood smeared across his face. His father stood over him, cane raised, shouting curses. "Disgrace!" his father spat. "You're a pathetic excuse for a Malfoy. Don't you ever show your face to me again, or I won't stop before using the killing curse on my own son." His mother tried to intervene, but Draco's father stormed off, leaving Draco writhing in pain. I saw him flinch, and everything inside me snapped. "Draco!" I rushed to his side, pushing through the crowd of students. "What happened?" He winced as he sat up. I told them I wasn't part of this dark family, that I couldn't keep doing the wrongs they wanted. I told them I loved you." His voice got quieter. Dad would have cursed me if Mom didn't stop him. I was stunned. "You did this for me? You left your family for me?" He looked up, eyes soft. "I told you, I'd do whatever it took to prove it to you. I'm not my family, Harry. I can't let you push me away because of them. And you said that day that I was a follower of the Dark Lord, right? That I'd always support him? Like my family? But that's not true. Because I support you. Hell, I love you. And if you let me, I'll follow you anywhere. Even if it means fighting against my own family when the time comes. Or taking on the Dark Lord himself. But please, just stay with me." I could feel my chest tighten, my emotions spiraling, and before I could stop myself, I leaned down and kissed him. "You idiot," I whispered against his lips. "I think I've fallen for you too." Luna's voice interrupted us. "I told you he truly loves him," she said to Hermione, her eyes gleaming. "Okay, maybe I was wrong this one time," Hermione chuckled. Draco pulled me closer, his smile relieved, as if he'd just won a gruesome battle. "You're all I need, Harry." And for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. I was finally sure. 'Cause apparently, the guy I hated the most was now the love of my life. Conclusion. A year had passed, and somehow it felt like the world had shifted in ways I never expected. We were all together now, sitting around the table in the Weasley house, laughter filling the air. Draco had found a place here, not just in my life, but with my family too. It took time, but when they saw how much he really loved me, they came around. Ron was as obnoxious as ever. Hermione was a calming presence as usual. And even Viktor and Luna felt at home, laughing and chatting like old friends. This, all of this was home. My family. As I glanced at Draco across the room, he caught my eye and excused himself. He pulled me into a quiet corner, his lips brushing mine softly. "Merry Christmas, Potter," he whispered, his voice warm and full of everything I never knew I needed. And in that moment, I knew this was it. This was my forever. The end. Who would you want to date from the Harry Potter world? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.